At the grocery store, my daughter tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, can we get the cookies for Daddy again? The ones Grandma always buys him? My hand tightened on the shopping cart. What cookies, baby? The ones from last Tuesday when Grandma took me to see Daddy at his new house. Nora reached for the package. He said they're his favorites. Mom, my voice came out deadly calm. What house? She's confused, Mom said quickly. Too quickly. You know how kids mix things up. The secret house? Nora interrupted. Oh, I know. The one Daddy lives in. Yay! My knees almost buckled. How many times, Mom? She looked at the floor, then the ceiling. Anywhere but at me. It's not what you think. How many times? Every Tuesday, Nora answered innocently. After lunch, Grandma says you're too tired from work to know. Tuesday. Everything started to click. Nora's anxiety attacks always peaked on Wednesdays. The bedwetting started on a Wednesday. The nightmares that made her claw at her sheets, screaming for me. The realization hit like ice water. Her therapist said the mental health regression started 6 months ago. Mom's hands shook on the cart handle. A girl needs her father. He broke my jaw. The words exploded out of me. Other shoppers turned to stare. I didn't care. I ate through a straw for 2 months. You drove me to the hospital. You saw the x-rays. Nora's eyes went wide. She'd never heard this story. He's changed, Mom whispered. He goes to church now. He showed me. The bruises on her legs. My voice cracked. 3 months ago. She said she fell at the playground. I grabbed Mom's wrist tight. But there's no playground is there. She yanked away. He would never. You said that about me too. I was screaming now. Security was walking over. When I showed up at your door bleeding, when I begged you to help me leave, you said I was being dramatic. Said I should try harder. Nora started crying. I knelt down, forcing my voice to sound gentle. Baby, has Daddy ever given you medicine? Special vitamins? She nodded. The sleepy juice. When I get scared. He says it helps me relax. Bile rose in my throat. Mom's face went gray. You're doing it again. My voice was barely a whisper. The same thing you did to me. You let him drug her to keep her quiet. It's just Benadryl. It's just drugging my child. I thought about every Tuesday. Always coming home to find Nora unusually tired. Mom always saying she'd had a big day at the park. I work 60 hours a week. Tears streamed down my face. I haven't bought new shoes in 3 years. I skip lunch most days. Every penny goes to keeping her safe. I laughed, harsh and broken. While you've been delivering her to him like a freaking pizza slice. Mom tried to reach for Nora's hands, but I blocked her. The court said supervised visits only, with a social worker present. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the document. See this? This is what you signed. As a witness, you testified about what he did to me. People deserve second chances. Not with my daughter. My hands shook as I found more evidence. Her teacher said she's been tired on Wednesdays. Unfocused. I blamed myself. I thought I was failing her. The security guard reached us. Ma'am, is everything? Call 911. I didn't look away from my mother. Tell them it's a custody violation. Kidnapping. Child endangerment. Mom's face crumpled. Stephanie, please. I'm your mother. You were. The words came out cold. Final. Nora, remember when we talked about unsafe secrets? The ones that make your tummy hurt? My daughter nodded, tears on her cheeks. It's time to tell those secrets, baby. All of them. Even about the lady there sometimes? Nora whispered. The one who smells like cigarettes? My vision went red. What lady? Daddy's friend. She's mean. She grabbed my arm once. Hard. Grandma said not to tell. I saw my mother's whole body flinch. She knew. She knew there was another woman there, unsupervised with my baby. Grandma said you'd take me away if you found out, Nora whispered. The final piece. She'd coached my 6-year-old to lie to me. Made her carry this weight. This fear. The police arrived as I dialed another number. Yes, I need adult protective services. My mother appears to be showing signs of dementia, taking a child to dangerous situations, unable to comprehend legal documents. Mom's eyes widened in horror as she realized what I was doing. Also, I continued calmly, she may be receiving money from my ex-husband, financial exploitation of a vulnerable senior. As they led my mother away for questioning, she looked back once. I saw her mouth. Please. I turned away. She thought this was the worst moment of her life, but she had no idea what was coming. The officer's hand landed on my shoulder and pulled me back from Mom, while another cop stepped between us. Nora's fingers dug into my shirt as her whole body shook against me. The officer asked if we needed medical attention, and something clicked in my brain. This was my chance to get everything documented the right way. I told him yes, we needed to check if my daughter had been drugged. His face changed immediately, and he called for an ambulance while the other officer led Mom toward the exit. The paramedics arrived within minutes and loaded us into the back while Mom watched from the police car. Nora kept asking if Grandma was in trouble, and her voice sounded so small and confused. I stroked her hair and told her nobody was mad at her. She did the right thing by telling the truth. The paramedic started taking notes when Nora mentioned feeling funny and sleepy after Daddy's special juice. His pen moved faster across the clipboard as she described how her tummy felt weird. The ambulance ride took forever, but also felt like seconds. At the ER, the triage nurse's expression hardened when I explained about the sleepy juice my ex gave Nora. My voice cracked as I laid out the pattern of Tuesday visits and Wednesday symptoms. She marked our case as priority and got us into a room immediately. A different officer showed up to take my full statement while we waited for the doctor. I handed over the custody order showing supervised visits only. He wrote down everything about how Mom claimed they were at the park every Tuesday for 6 months. His notebook filled with details about Nora's anxiety and bedwetting and nightmares that always peaked on Wednesdays. The doctor came in and took Nora for her exam while I stepped into the hallway. My hands shook as I called her therapist's emergency line. I explained what happened and that we needed an urgent session to document everything for court. She scheduled us for the next morning and mentioned she'd need to make a mandatory report. My phone started buzzing with text after text from Mom. Apologies and excuses and claims I was overreacting mixed with threats about destroying our family. I screenshot every single message without responding and created a folder labeled evidence. My hands kept shaking, but I forced myself to stay systematic about it. The doctor brought Nora back and explained they'd run tests, but Benadryl leaves the system quickly. She said Nora's symptoms matched what we described though. That night after we got home, Nora finally fell asleep in my bed after crying for an hour. I sat at the kitchen table and typed an email to her teacher requesting written documentation. I kept the tone professional and just asked for observations about Wednesdays specifically. Every piece of evidence mattered now. I barely slept, and first thing the next morning I called the DV legal clinic. The intake worker said they could see me today if I got there by noon. I called in sick to work knowing I'd lose the day's pay but having no choice. My boss sounded annoyed, but I couldn't explain what was happening. I dropped Nora at the school and drove straight to the clinic. Diego Alvarez met me in a small conference room with papers spread across the table. He laid out our strategy while taking taking notes on everything I told him. We'd file for emergency modification and coordinate with CPS and document everything obsessively. He explained we needed to show a clear pattern and immediate danger to Nora. The retainer would normally be $2,000, but they'd work with me on payments. I signed everything he put in front of me and gave him copies of all my screenshots. He said the texts from Mom were gold because they showed admission of the visits. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with a 3-ring binder and dividers. I created sections for medical records and school documentation and therapy notes and photos. Every Tuesday got highlighted in yellow on the calendar pages I printed. Every Wednesday symptom got documented in red. I found receipts from work showing I was there those Tuesday afternoons. Each receipt proved I couldn't have known what was happening. The binder grew thicker as I added printouts of Mom's texts and the custody order. I made copies of Nora's medical records from the ER visit. The doctor's notes about symptoms consistent with antihistamine overdosing went in the medical section. My eyes burned from staring at papers, but I kept going. This binder would be my weapon in court. Every page showed how they betrayed my trust and hurt my baby. I thought about all those Tuesdays when I came home exhausted from work. Mom always said Nora had a big day at the park and needed an early bedtime. I believed her because she was my mother and I trusted her to protect Nora. The rage built in my chest, but I pushed it down and kept organizing papers. Anger wouldn't help in court, but documentation would. By midnight, the binder was 2 inches thick and perfectly organized with labeled tabs. Tomorrow, I'd start gathering more evidence and building our case stronger. The next morning, I dropped Nora at her therapy appointment and watched through the one-way glass as she grabbed the crayons. She drew a red door first, then added a church with bells next to it. The therapist asked what else she remembered about Daddy's house. Nora drew a big mean dog in the yard and colored it black with sharp teeth. There's something really strange about how Mom keeps looking everywhere except at her daughter, the floor, the ceiling, but never making eye contact when she's caught in this huge lie. She added a basement with a TV and drew stick figures watching movies down there. Then she drew a lady with yellow hair who yells a lot. The therapist wrote down every single word Nora said without asking leading questions. She just let Nora talk and draw whatever came to her mind. I took photos of the drawings with my phone for our evidence folder. That weekend, while Nora stayed with my neighbor, I drove to my ex's church and started searching the nearby streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I turned down each block looking for a red door. 3 blocks from the church, I spotted his truck parked outside a rundown house. The red door matched Nora's drawing exactly. I recognized the woman on the porch from old Facebook photos my ex had been tagged in. She was smoking a cigarette and had the same bleached blonde hair Nora drew. I parked down the street and pulled out my phone to take pictures. I stayed on the public sidewalk and zoomed in to get the house number clearly. I took photos of his truck's license plate and the red door. I made sure the timestamp showed on every photo. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to be careful and not give him any reason to claim I was stalking or harassing him. I drove away after getting what I needed and went straight home to upload everything to the cloud. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail and listened to my ex screaming about how I was poisoning Nora against him. He said I was committing parental alienation and he'd file his own emergency motion. He called me every name in the book and threatened to destroy me in court. I saved the recording immediately and forwarded it to Diego with a note about the threats. My phone rang again an hour later with the APS worker returning my call about Mom. She took detailed notes as I explained how Mom had witnessed my ex's abuse, but still took Nora to him. The worker mentioned they'd investigate if my ex had been paying Mom money. She said financial exploitation of seniors was something they took seriously. She asked for dates and any proof of payments. I told her about Mom's comments about gas money and grocery help. 2 days later, the ER called with Nora's test results. The doctor explained the Benadryl was already out of her system since it had been almost a week since Tuesday, but she said Nora's symptoms I described matched antihistamine overdosing perfectly. She offered to write a letter for court stating that the symptoms were consistent even without positive test results. I thanked her and asked her to email it directly to Diego. That night, after Nora went to bed, I pulled up the 911 recording the police had given me. I transcribed every word into a document and highlighted the important parts. Hearing myself say, "My mother's been taking my daughter to her abusive father," made my stomach turn. But it was proof of what happened that day in the store. I added the transcript to the binder with a timestamp clearly marked. At Nora's second therapy appointment 3 days later, she brought up the sleepy juice without anyone asking. She told the therapist exactly what it tasted like and how it made her feel funny. The therapist explained she'd write a detailed report for court about what Nora disclosed. She said professional documentation from a licensed therapist would carry more weight than just my word alone. She also noted that Nora hadn't been coached because her story stayed consistent without prompting. The next day, CPS called to schedule something called a forensic interview. Amina Farouk introduced herself as the caseworker and explained the whole process. She said trained interviewers would talk to Nora at the Child Advocacy Center while everything got video recorded. They had special protocols to preserve testimony for court. She said I couldn't be in the room, but I could watch on a monitor in another room. She scheduled it for the following week and gave me the address. That same afternoon, I got an email from Nora's teacher with 3 months of observations. She'd gone back through her notes and found a clear pattern of Wednesday problems. She wrote about Nora being exhausted every Wednesday and having trouble focusing on those days. She mentioned occasional fearfulness that seemed to spike midweek. The teacher also noted that since the Tuesday visits stopped, Nora seemed much calmer and more engaged in class. She said she'd testify if needed and attached her professional credentials to the email. I printed everything and added it to the growing pile of evidence. Each piece of documentation made our case stronger and proved I wasn't making this up. The binder kept getting thicker as more professionals confirmed what I'd been seeing. My ex could deny all he wanted, but the evidence was piling up against him. Every document, every recording, every photo showed the truth about what he and Mom had done to my baby. The forensic interview was scheduled for the next week at the Child Advocacy Center downtown. I barely slept the night before, going over every possible question they might ask Nora. We arrived early, and I filled out more paperwork while Nora played with blocks in the waiting area. Priya Nair came out to get her, a woman with kind eyes who explained she'd be talking to Nora alone while I watched from another room. My hands clenched into fists as I sat in front of the monitor, watching my baby walk into that room without me. Priya was gentle, starting with easy questions about school and favorite colors before slowly moving to harder topics. Nora sat cross-legged on the floor, playing with dolls while she talked about Daddy's house. She described the sleepy juice like it was normal, saying it tasted bad but made her feel funny. She mentioned the mean lady who smelled like cigarettes and grabbed her arm that one time. Priya asked careful questions without leading, letting Nora tell things in her own words. The interview lasted 45 minutes that felt like hours. After it ended, the Advocacy Center staff explained what would happen next with our case. They said Nora's testimony was clear and consistent, which would help, but warned that children's words alone rarely win custody cases. They handed me pamphlets about their free counseling services and said we qualified regardless of how the case turned out. That night after Nora went to bed, I opened Facebook on my laptop and started searching. I typed my ex's name and scrolled through months of posts from his church friends. There she was in photo after photo, the woman Nora described with the cigarettes. She was tagged at church picnics, volunteer events, always standing next to him. The timestamps showed she'd been around for at least 6 months, right when the secret visits started. I screenshot everything, making sure the dates and tags were visible. My printer ran out of ink halfway through, so I drove to the office store at 10 p.m. to buy more cartridges. Back home, I printed every single photo and labeled them with sticky notes about why they mattered. Diego had said social media evidence was gold because people forgot to delete old tags. The girlfriend being there during unsupervised visits violated the custody order completely. I organized them chronologically in plastic sleeves, adding them to my growing evidence binder. 2 days later, Mom left another voicemail while I was at work. Her voice sounded broken as she talked about God and forgiveness and how I was breaking her heart. Then she mentioned something about the help my ex gave her with groceries when times were tight. I saved the recording immediately and forwarded it to Diego without listening to the rest. That admission about him paying her was exactly what we needed for the financial exploitation angle. I spent that evening going through 2 years of old text messages from Mom. My eyes burned from staring at the screen, but I found what I was looking for. Messages from Tuesdays asking for gas money to take Nora to the park. Comments about being short on cash right before the visit started. Diego had already subpoenaed bank records that would show deposits from my ex on those exact dates. The financial trail proved this whole thing was planned, not some grandmother wanting to help. I printed those texts too, highlighting the important parts with yellow marker. Diego called the next morning to say he was filing our emergency motion with everything we'd gathered. Medical reports, therapy notes, teacher observations, photos, financial records, all of it. The court clerk said they could get us on the calendar in 2 weeks. We were asking for suspended visitation and a permanent no-contact order for Mom. Diego warned me to expect my ex to file something in response. 3 days later, I got home from work to find legal papers taped to my door. My ex's counter motion claimed parental alienation and demanded makeup visitation for all the time he'd missed. Reading his lies about me coaching Nora made me want to throw up. He said I was turning her against him and denying his parental rights. Diego told me this was standard tactics and not to worry. The same day, I got a call from the court saying they'd appointed Marek Kowalski as guardian ad litem. He would investigate what was best for Nora and make recommendations to the judge. His assistant scheduled a home visit for the following week. I spent the entire weekend deep cleaning our apartment, scrubbing baseboards, and organizing every closet. I bought new sheets for Nora's bed and made sure all her artwork was displayed on the walls. The place needed to look perfect, even though I knew they weren't really judging my housekeeping. Marek would want to see where Nora lived and interview us separately about everything. After he left, I turned my attention back to the timeline binder that had become my obsession. I bought color-coded tabs and created a master index so anyone could find any piece of evidence instantly. I wonder how she knew exactly which streets to search near the church. Did she remember something Nora said about the distance? The way that red door matched the drawing perfectly makes me think about how kids notice such specific details when they're scared or uncomfortable. Every document got copied 3 times. One set for court, one for Diego, one backup I kept in my car. The binder grew to 3 inches thick, held together with the biggest rings I could find. Each section had its own color: medical in blue, school in green, police reports in red. I spent hours making sure every page was in order, every date clear, every piece of proof exactly where it needed to be. My phone rang the next morning while I was getting Nora ready for school. Amina from CPS had their preliminary recommendation ready after reviewing everything we'd sent over. She explained they were recommending supervised visits only at a designated center for my ex, pending further investigation into the drugging allegations. They also wanted him to complete anger management and parenting classes before any changes could be considered. I wrote down every word she said on the notepad I kept by the phone now, making sure I got the exact wording about the safety concerns they'd identified. It wasn't the complete no-contact order I'd hoped for, but having CPS officially supporting supervised visits only was huge for our case. 2 days later, the APS investigator called about Mom's case. They'd completed their investigation and found her mentally competent, but noted she appeared susceptible to manipulation and that there were clear financial incentives involved in her actions. The investigator said they couldn't force any specific actions since Mom wasn't deemed incapacitated, but their report would become part of our court evidence showing her choices were deliberate, not confused. I asked for a copy of the full report and added the case number to my growing list of documentation. That afternoon, my boss asked me to stay after my shift ended. He sat me down in his office and explained that all the time I'd been missing for court appointments and emergency meetings was becoming a problem for scheduling. I pulled out the folder I'd been carrying with the court documents showing the custody emergency and asked if we could work something out. After 20 minutes of negotiation, we agreed I'd drop to part-time hours with a flexible schedule that would let me handle all the legal stuff. The pay cut meant I'd have to apply for food assistance, but protecting Nora was worth eating ramen for however long this took. My phone buzzed that evening with a text from an unknown number calling me a vindictive bitch who was destroying a good father. The writing style and specific phrases made it obvious this was the girlfriend from my ex's house. I took a screenshot immediately without responding, then blocked the number and forwarded everything to Diego. He texted back within minutes saying this was perfect evidence of harassment and witness intimidation to add to our file. 3 days later, I got home from my shortened shift to find a thick envelope from the court in my mailbox. My hands shook as I opened the interim order. The judge had reviewed our emergency motion and ruled that Mom was barred from any unsupervised contact with Nora, effective immediately. My ex's visits were suspended pending the full hearing scheduled for next month. The order specifically noted serious concerns about child safety based on the evidence presented. I sat on my front step